All right, so I'm Crystal Farmer. I am from Gastonia Freedom School, which is an Agile Learning Center. So I'm going to give a little bit of information about Agile Learning Centers, and then I'm going to talk a lot about how Agile Learning Centers are trying to address social justice and income inequality, how they try to be aware of racial differences, income differences, and how to make self-directed learning more accessible to students. So I would just start by saying ALCs are they're centers for self-directed learners. They are intentionally a center because they're not always in the form of a private school or independent school. Sometimes they're a homeschool resource group. Sometimes they're just a co-op. But a lot of them are structured in some way to meet the state standards for school age kids. So most ALCs have K through 12 students. Some of them have what we call a Roots program, which is for preschool kids to start on their self-directed journeys. ALCs are different from Sudbury and free schools in that they don't have a democratic kind of leadership. What we do is we have committees, and then we have the facilitators to kind of take the lead on what rules and what guidelines should we have for the community to operate in. And so instead of us having a lot of meetings where we're voting majority rules, we're having a lot of meetings where we're discussing what we want to do. And then at the end of the day, the facilitators are probably going to be the ones who kind of lead and guide what decision gets implemented. ALCs are different from a lot of self-directed and unschooling type programs in that we use this thing called Agile tools. So Agile is a software development philosophy. And so we borrow some of those tools to create some focus or create some structure around our days. So one thing that we do is a set the week or a set the day meeting, and that's where we go and everybody will throw up their offerings on the board. They'll say, this is what I want to do. We'll kind of make a little schedule and say, we're going to do this and this and this. And that's how we kind of provide some structure for the students. So the offerings come not just from us as facilitators, but also from the students. And if there are people in the community who would like to offer things, we always are welcome to have those people make offerings for us. Another thing that we do is called the Kanban Board, or a book. So Kanban is this kind of work style where you keep track of things that you have to do. I mean, it's kind of an advanced to-do list. So it's things that you want to do, things that you're planning on doing, and then, some kind of goals. And so the centers that I've seen, what they do is at the beginning and end of the week, they'll have their Kanban book out, and each kid will write down a couple things that they really want to focus on that week, the things that they're intending to do. And they'll put that on their board to say, this is what I'm going to be working on. And at the end of the week, we have an intentional reflection period where we say, okay, this is what I was planning on doing, and this is what the reality was. And that's a good place for us to have discussions about, did I need more resources? Did I have what I needed? Did I want to do something else and got distracted? Did I really put a lot of value into what I wanted to do? And maybe that's why I put it on there. But then when I got into it, I decided it wasn't something that I was interested in. So that's a good way that we have a lot of discussion around how we do our work and how we do our self-directed learning. So that creates a good cycle of intention and then reflection. So some of the demographics of ALCs, as far as I can understand, there are about 60 ALCs in North America and 20 in the rest of the world. My experience, and especially as we get to talking about social justice, is from ALCs in the United States. So race and poverty, all of those have a different context in different communities. So I'll just be giving you my experience from communities in America and specifically in the South. So most ALCs and most self-directed schools are majority white, and they have middle class and upper class families. And this is simply because wealthier families have the resources to seek alternative schools. So if you think about a school schedule where, you meet from 9 to 12 or 9 to 1 during the day, there are families that may have a parent who stays at home or works part-time that can pick up the child. There may be families that come to school just a couple of days a week. And again, that's where you have some family with the resources to be able to have people to pick up the child, bring them to school, and then assist in whatever way they need to help the child with their learning. When it comes to Black families and other families of color, so Hispanic families, Indian families, I would say Asian families are a little bit different because they have a different profile in the US, but when it comes to families of color, most of them have less resources and less wealth. So that means that these families have to send their kids to public school and have an after-school program. So they may work from, 5 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon. So they're not able to take their kids to school. They may have both parents working. So they can't go to partial day programs. There are some families that don't have the resources to go around to different schools in the area and say, well, is this school right for me? Is this school right for me? That whole process of finding the perfect school, is sometimes abbreviated when you have families with less wealth. And then there are families that are interested in creating a different culture for their families, but they don't have the support network to do that. So if you think about the homeschools that are in your area, the homeschool groups, the learning centers, they may all be majority white areas. And so when you have a Black family that is interested and has the resources to join one of these families, they may feel uncomfortable participating in that. And that's just because of the way that white supremacy works in America, in that there are these cultures that are created that are majority white, and they sometimes don't pay attention to the needs of Black students and students of color. So how do we talk about social justice? So I think the Agile Learning Network is really great in that they're aware of, that these issues and the ways that kids are not always able to access alternative education. So it's some of the specific things that we do as a network. And again, this is, kind of general network thing. Each ALC may do it differently. But some of the things that we do are we have a sliding scale tuition. So we have different tiers of, what should each family that's making this amount of income pay for school. And so that gives parents on the lower end of the scale the opportunity to say, this is what I can afford. Can I still be a part of the group with this money? And then families on the higher end of the scale can say, well, I can afford this and I can afford some more. So, if they feel like it, they can say, I want to provide an additional amount to the school to help the center to help fund that. So we have a sliding scale and it's based on trust. That means we are asking the parents to tell us what their income is. We're not always going to say, show us your W-2s and, give us all these financial statements, because we want to create this system of trust where if we can tell them if I can tell them what I'm making, they can trust me to give them any information if something changes or something becomes too difficult, and we can kind of have this communication, have this relationship around what are we doing to make sure that the school is thriving and that our kids can get access to that education. Another thing that we do, we try to be conscious about the ways that white supremacy shows up in our educational venues. So Heartwood ALC down in Atlanta just led a really beautiful discussion about race and self-directed learning. And I hope they do more of these and that we can do some in the other regions of the country, where the panel was Black and brown women who were talking about their unschooling journeys and how their identity affects the way that they unschool. And so when it comes to race, there is just this baseline, what we call white supremacy, and that's just the way that white culture imposes itself on the entire US system. And so as a Black woman, when I say I'm living in a system of white supremacy, it means that the cultural assumptions and expectations are not the same ones that necessarily that I share. So one of those things, for instance, would be my hair. So I have natural hair, and there's been a couple of news articles where some businesses will say this natural hair is not acceptable. It doesn't meet dress code. And that's me working in a white supremacy system that values the way that white people can present themselves with straight hair or with, you know, different hairstyles from me. And so that plays out in different ways for our children. So when it comes to students that are in a mixed race group, you may have Black students who don't get the same amount of attention as white students. And it may be because they seem different or they talk different, or, you know, they may have natural hair and the other students don't know how to talk to them about it. So that's where we have a great opportunity to work with the kids and talk to them about racial differences and say, you know, this is part of our world. You know, people are different, but everybody is special. And so we can actually talk through these conversations about what does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be Black? Are there things that you are unconsciously doing that may hurt a person of another race? So I think those conversations are really important to have. I believe that children, even as young as 5, are able to have these conversations. And at my school, we have these conversations all the time. So somebody in the notes put that Akila Richards has a podcast. She talks a lot about unschooling from the perspective of a person of color, and her children are Black, and they are really wonderful, well-spoken kids who are just so passionate about their self-directed learning and about race. And I think they just have a lot to say. So now I'm going to talk about how Gastonia Freedom School does its mission of social justice, income, and inequality. So Gastonia Freedom School was founded to focus on kids who are low income, who are minorities, and who have disabilities. Now, we are a private school registered in North Carolina, so we do not discriminate. We don't have any rules about who can and can't be in the school. But the way our school is now in its first year, we have majority low income students and we have majority Black and biracial students. And so, and I say majority of them have some type of disability. Most of it would be autism or ADHD. So what happens is that we have to create different structures, or we have to do different things to make our schools more comfortable for these students. So I would say our school has a Black culture because I'm Black and I'm a facilitator. And then most of the kids are Black. And so some of the things that where Black culture shows up is in the food that we eat. So, you know, unlike other schools, we don't have a focus on natural eating or organic foods because we recognize that a lot of Black families don't have access to that type of food. And also that they may have grown up on this comfort food of, you know, kind of snack food. So our snacks are pretty standard snacks for what you would see in a public school cafeteria. And that's a cultural difference that we have. Another thing is that we are, as kids with disabilities, one of the things that we have to do is create some more structures around how they can operate in the school. So they're still self-directed and they can still plan their days, but sometimes they have problems with emotional regulation. Sometimes they're not able to communicate what they need. And so we have a lot of support systems in place to help those kids communicate and to help them be able to talk about what they need without putting these expectations of them being a typical kid. So instead of saying that, you know, these kids over here, they have to come and tell me if something's wrong. Sometimes I have a kid who will say, well, you know, he just says that he uses, I forgot what, but he repeats phrases And so these phrases are his cues to say, you know, this is what I'm trying to get you to do, but I'm not saying it in these exact words. And so that's for us to start to understand, you know, this is what he needs, so I can ask him the questions and get him what he wants. So that's kind of how our culture as an ALC serving these disadvantaged kids works. The other thing I want to talk about is that we have been doing Black History Month, and it's been really great for me and for the kids. This is kind of the first time as a teacher that I've been able to discuss Black History Month with majority Black kids. And it's hard, it's really hard, because they have personal stories of discrimination and prejudice in their lives, and they can, you know, point down the street and see that there are differences between the places that they live and go to church and the places that other white families live and go to church. And so that's been a really important part of educating, and that's why I like talking to the other ALCs and other people in the unschooling world about race and how it affects our kids. So, questions?
Thank you so much, Crystal. Yeah, folks, if you want to throw a question or two into the chat box, what I'd also like folks to do, I'm going to start assigning people into the breakout rooms. Some of you were able to choose. I sent out a quick poll, and so I'm going to start kind of doing that first. If you haven't had a chance, I just put the 2 workshops that are coming up. Actually, Crystal will be on a panel with Anthony and Nancy. So if you haven't had a chance yet, could you please put that in the chat box? Please bear with me as I do this. This is going to take a few minutes, so we might be running a couple of minutes behind schedule, but I promise I will get everyone in. So if you have a couple of questions for Crystal, you can throw them here in the chat box.
Okay, yeah, there's one question about transportation. So we don't offer transportation right now. We are hoping to buy a nice van that we can use to pick up everybody. We're located on a side of Gastonia that is majority Black. So we would like to be able to create some kind of bus route. What we do have, we're open around 7:30 in the morning and we close around 5:30 in the afternoon. So that gives us a lot of flexibility for the parents to drop off their kids. We have a lot of aunts and grandmothers picking up their kids and dropping them off. So we try and make use of the informal networks that way. Why did I choose to do nonprofit versus private? So we are organized as a nonprofit organization, but we chose to be a private school because North Carolina offers vouchers to students who want to attend private schools, and it's either based on income or based on disability. So we knew that by being able to qualify for these vouchers, that there would be more students who either are low income or have disabilities would be able to access our program. We are also going through the process of getting accredited as a daycare so that we can get vouchers that low-income parents would have to, you know, daycare their preschool kids. And yeah, I'll be with the panel about talking about ALCs, and we can answer all kinds of questions about how the other ALCs work and about race and anything like that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Crystal. Folks, I'm going to put myself on